Everyone, hello back again to another video concerning another field of study. Well, as a reminder, I just would like to say that this video or this content is mainly designed for a master program, particularly for a subject of modern literary studies. And due to the outbreak of coronavirus, we can't really meet each other and we need to make our oral presentations. Therefore, I've tried to upload an oral presentation here. And as long as the presentation is uploaded here, I've tried to make it public so that everyone can benefit from the content of this video. So you're welcome again. Today we're dealing with a different concept, mainly in literature, that is post-colonial theory, and of course from a literary perspective. It's going to be mainly presented by Mohammed Bakuri and Mohammed Zarkan, my little self. This is the first part. You will see the second part displayed by Mohammed Bakuri. So as you can see, the outline is really so simplified, starting with definition, moving to historical background, some key figures, and ending up with examples to study and to consider. So first of all, we are starting with the definition, and of course, I've said that I've tried to make it clear enough that post-colonial theory can be approached from different perspectives, and today we are dealing with the literary perspective. It can be approached, for example, from the political and the religious one as well, as far as I can tell. The definition here, the post in post-colonial does not necessarily mean after, as to have the morphological denotation of after colonial, but it is an arbitrary construct which expresses continuum, nonetheless heavily semantically punctuated by the colonial as it serves as its prime essence. So here I wanted to have this illustration just to make sure that you understand what post-colonial theory actually means. It does not only involve the aftermath of colonialism, but it takes into account the period of colonialism as well, the colonial era. So the analysis of this theory are based on both eras. The second one is, it is a body of thought being interested in and accounting for the political, aesthetic, economic, historical, and social impact of European colonial rule around the world in the 18th through the 20th century. Just to make something clear here, when talking about colonialism, especially in the post-colonial theory, it does not involve the American colonies at all. So here we are mainly interested in African, Asian, Middle Eastern, and somewhat Irish colonies. In other words, it has to do with many parts of the world, but excluding the American colonies. And of course, just to bear in mind that post-colonial theory takes interest in the imperial conquests, which are not by definition equal relationships. Moving to the historical background, while the field of post-colonial studies only began taking shape in the late 1970s and early 1980s, multiple fiction authors started publishing works in the decades Straight away following World War II, one of the most remarkable and famous post-colonial novels to emerge in this period was Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart, 1958. Of course, Chinua Achebe's work is really so interesting in the sense that it illustrates how the African, of course, it's not a total representation of Africa, but it really shows how an African author gives a feedback to those colonizers who try to, in the sense, or who try to colonize African countries based on some certain justifications, such as civilization. And I will focus later on this example of Chinua Achebe and his novel as well. We can, of course, talk about a certain critical theory without really mentioning their key figures. Of course, you can find a multiple and a huge number of numerous key figures, but I've tried to take the main figures like Edward Said, Gayatri Spivak, Frantz Fanon, and Homi Bhabha. Of course, Edward Said is very renowned for his work Orientalism, which is a body of thoughts taking interest in how the West really conceives of the Orient and the image that the West needed to create in order to focus or to reveal this notion of superiority. The West needed, yes, according to Edward Said, of course, needed this image to be superior. Of course, Orientalism, as we've seen in the other presentation, is really helpful work, but it does not account for example, the transformations taking place in the former colonies. Therefore, post-colonial theory is practically the body of thought that can account for what is taking place right there. Though some other critics say that it is very ambiguous and it does not really reveal much of these transformations. Gayatri Spivak, she is an Indian author. She was born, I guess, in 1942. She wrote a huge or a long essay called Can the Subaltern Speak? Both Orientalism and subalternity notions will be explored later on by my colleague in the other half of the oral presentation. And of course, in brief, subalternity refers to those who are in a low socio-economic status. So they don't have really the means to negotiate with those who are in a higher position. Frantz Fanon, on the other hand, he's a philosopher, he's a psychiatrist, he is a lot of things, to be honest. And his works or his critical thoughts are really so influential in the field of post-colonialism. Even the term Fanonism was coined after his thoughts being published. Everything that links to Frantz Fanon or everything that goes under the umbrella of his thoughts is called Fanonism, being interested in racism, for example, humanitarianism, and other concepts or other critical thoughts. Homi Bhabha, I think he is an Indian thinker as well, like Gayatri Spivak. He also focuses on mimicry, because Franz Fanon focuses on mimicry as well. So he says that colonial mimicry is the desire a for a reformed, recognizable other. And mimicry will be again explored by my colleague. Just in brief, mimicry refers to the set of imitations that the colonized need to acquire in order to make themselves fit in the eyes of the colonizer. These are some colonial justifications. In brief, that are, I think, mainly 3 or 4. We can add the humanitarian justification. For example, those white men or white people needed a justification relating to their civilization, that those colonies are not civilized, and so it is our task to help them be more civilized. Economic justification, to help those countries grow economically, potentially. And we can really take into account the religious justification, because for me, I believe it is the most important one, because religion is a huge institution that shapes that have been always a key figure in shaping the people's minds. And so if you can check some people's testimonies in Africa, you can really understand how religious justification brainwashed their heads, how they were brainwashed to not, for example, take part in the political decisions, in decision making. Of course, it goes without saying that we need to check some of the textualities concerning those colonial places. And here I would like to start with Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. And I think this is one of the most influential novels that can be really so helpful in understanding how post-colonial theory actually operates. So Heart of Darkness was written in the highest peak of the colonial period. It was set in the 1890s at the European colonies in Africa, in the Congo mainly. So here I wanted to take an extract from the novel. I think this is in chapter number 1. So for those who don't really know Heart of Darkness, it is about a sailor coming to I don't really quite remember the novel very clearly, because I've read this one very long time ago. But it is about a sailor exploring the heart of the Congo through a river, and his encounter with the native people, and how the description develops. So here, 6 black men advanced in a file, toiling up the path. They walked erect and slow, balancing small baskets full of earth on their heads, and the clink kept time with their footsteps. Black rags were wound round their loins, and the short ends behind wagged to and fro like tails. They were called criminals, and the outraged law, like the bursting shells, had come to them, an insoluble mystery from over the sea. All their meager breasts panted together, the violently dilated nostrils quivered, the eyes stared stonily uphill. They passed me within 6 inches without a glance, with that complete, death-like indifference of unhappy savages. So you can really understand or get the gist of this paragraph and how people right there, how they were actually represented and described. Well, some critics say that all of the participants of this novel were described in the same manner in a derogatory way, but I think the focus or the derogatory kind of description was really concerned with the native people. Yeah, some adjectives here, or even expressions like tails, meager breeze, and so on. You can check the novel, and here we'll move to Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe, or we'll move to Chinua Achebe's conception and opinion concerning Heart of Darkness. And he already said that Joseph Conrad was a thoroughgoing racist in one of his interviews, as far as I can remember. So here he says, Heart of Darkness projects the image of Africa, the other world, the antithesis of Europe, therefore of civilization, a place where man's vaunted intelligence and refinement are finally mocked by triumphant bestiality. So here he says, well, he tries to illustrate the opinion and how Joseph Conrad used to think of Africa. So he says in the next point, the point of my observations should be quite clear by now, namely that Joseph Conrad was a thoroughgoing racist. That this simple truth is glossed over in criticism of his work is due to the fact that white racism against Africa is such a normal way of thinking that its manifestations go completely unremarked. Here Achebe reinforces the notion of racism as it is being manifested in so many different occasions during the novels of the imperialists, that the novels reinforce the imperial work. So here, for example, there is an extract from Things Fall Apart. I tried to take the first paragraph from the first chapter. Okonkwo, he's the main character, was well known throughout the 9 villages and even beyond. His fame rested on solid personal achievements. As a young man of 18, he had brought honor to his village by throwing Emmeline the cat. Emmeline was the great wrestler who for 7 years was unbeaten, from Umofia to Bino. He was called the cat because his back would never touch the earth. It was this man that Okonkwo threw in a fight which the old man agreed was one of the fiercest since the founder of their town engaged a spirit of the wild for 7 days and 7 nights. Things Fall Apart is a pretty nice novel that I really recommend to everyone to watch, because it's really so easy in terms of the style, especially for non-foreign speakers, and even for my colleagues to read, because it demonstrates how Chinua Achebe tries to describe the situation before the intrusion of the white man. So how they were living a simple life with a simple kind of civilization, and civilization is not really defined by the white man. So the white man they are not in the correct position to approve what civilization actually means. So they were living in a kind of organizational way, based on their way of organization. So after the intrusion of, or after the intervening of the imperialists, the imperial powers, things fall apart, as the novel suggests. So things were really so straight, things were really so strong and tight, but after the coming of the white man, things were no longer strong as they were. Yes, so things are no longer consistent. And again, you can explore in this novel how the white man used to treat the African people, and all of the yes. So I think that's it for today's presentation. Thank you, and thank you for my viewers and for my colleagues, for the professor. I couldn't really manage to say thank you the other time, but now I'm saying that you are very welcome. If you have any sort of questions, you can put them in the comment section below. For my colleagues who have other who can contact me otherwise, you are welcome as always. So thank you again, and I'll see you in the next video.